Rain streaked down the glass walls of the Skybridge Tower, the headquarters of Haverly Group, a gleaming monument to ambition. Inside, the air was heavy with tension. Clara Zhang, 29, senior executive of strategic development, stood before a room of board members. Her presentation slides glowed across the darkened room, every number sharp, every projection flawless. This was supposed to be her moment, the culmination of months of preparation. Except something was wrong. As the presentation ended, murmurs replaced applause. One of the directors leaned forward. "Ms. Zhang," he said, tone measured, "these projections are outdated. The figures don't match last quarter's data." Clara's heart froze. That couldn't be possible. She had double-checked every line, every figure, meticulously. Her mentor, Michael Liu, sat at the far end of the table, his expression unreadable. Beside him, her colleague and supposed closest friend, Grace Lin, avoided eye contact. Clara caught the faintest hint of tension in Grace's jaw. "No, it couldn't be." "Sir," Clara replied carefully, "those numbers are correct. They were finalized yesterday evening." Michael finally spoke, his tone calm, almost paternal. "Clara, you've done incredible work, but I reviewed the database this morning. Your data source was compromised. It seems someone accessed outdated internal files." The words sliced through her like a knife. She felt her pulse in her throat, each beat a drum of disbelief. "That's impossible," she whispered. But she saw it in Grace's eyes, the faint glimmer of guilt, quickly hidden behind sympathy. And in Michael's, the quiet satisfaction of a man who had planned this moment. Her mentor and her friend. Her allies. Her betrayers. That evening, Clara sat alone in her office as the city lights flickered outside. The sound of rain against the glass was a dull, rhythmic ache. Her phone buzzed, a message from Grace. "Grace, I'm so sorry about today. I had no idea the files were changed. Don't worry, Michael and I will try to smooth things over." Clara stared at the message, her nails digging into her palm. Smooth things over? They had destroyed her credibility in front of the board. Years of loyalty, sleepless nights, and ambition, reduced to whispers and doubt. Then another message came. "Michael, Clara, you're young. Learn from this. Ambition is admirable, but patience builds legacy. Let me handle the board for now." A cold laugh escaped her lips. Patience. That was his way of saying, "Stay quiet while I take credit for your work." Clara stood and looked out over the glittering skyline. Beneath the shine of the city was a network of ambition, lies, and manipulation, and she had just learned the cost of trust. But as she stared into the reflection of her own eyes in the window, something within her shifted. The woman who walked into that boardroom this morning had been naive. The one who stood here now was something else entirely. "You wanted me out of your way," she thought. "Fine. I'll step aside. But only to watch you fall." Her phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. "Unknown, I saw what happened today. You deserve better. Call me when you're ready to fight back." She hesitated, then smiled faintly. Every empire falls from the inside. And Clara Zhang had just begun plotting her revenge. The next morning, the sun rose over the city like nothing had changed, but Clara Zhang had. Gone was the bright, trusting executive who believed talent and loyalty were enough to climb the ladder. In her place stood someone colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. At 7 a.m., she walked into the Haverly Group office as if nothing had happened. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with quiet precision, every step measured. Eyes followed her, whispers trailing behind like smoke. "Did you hear? The board rejected her proposal. Michael's probably going to take over her project now." "I heard Grace tried to help her, but Clara froze." Lies. All of them. Carefully planted narratives. But Clara didn't flinch. She smiled politely, nodded at familiar faces, and went straight to her desk. The best revenge, she knew now, didn't start with anger. It started with information. Her phone buzzed. The same unknown number from last night. Unknown. You didn't call. Smart. Offices have ears. Unknown. Meet me tonight. 9 p.m. 46th floor, East Terrace. Clara hesitated only a moment. She didn't trust easily anymore, but something about the message felt intentional, calculated, like someone who knew how this game was played. She sent a short reply. Clara, I'll be there. At precisely 9 p.m., the terrace was empty except for one man leaning against the railing. He turned as she stepped outside. Tall, dark suit, the kind of confidence that came from power, not position. His face was striking, but his eyes, sharp and assessing, told her he was no stranger to betrayal either. Clara Zhang, he said with a faint smile. I was wondering if you'd actually come. Depends, she replied coolly. Are you here to help me or use me? He chuckled softly. Maybe both. I'm Adrian Wu, financial strategist. I've been watching Haverly Group for a while, and I know you've been set up. Clara crossed her arms. You seem well informed. What do you want? I want balance, he said simply. Michael Liu has been cooking numbers for months, padding expenses, shifting budgets, and making sure his name stays clean. Grace Lin handles the legwork. You were their distraction. But you're also their weak point, because they underestimated you. Clara's eyes narrowed. And you think I'll just help you expose them? I think, Adrian said, stepping closer, you'll help yourself. I can give you access to the company's audit system. The real one. Off the record. Quietly. You'll find everything you need there. A pause. The city lights gleamed around them like silent witnesses. And why should I trust you? She asked finally. Adrian smiled. Not kindly, but knowingly. Because you don't have to. You just have to want to win. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She accessed the link Adrian sent, hidden behind layers of encrypted data. And what she found made her blood run cold. Altered records, duplicate payments, ghost accounts. Michael's fingerprints were everywhere. Grace's, too. By dawn, she closed her laptop and leaned back, her expression unreadable. She finally understood. They hadn't just betrayed her. They'd used her as a shield, a fall girl for their corruption. But they had made one fatal mistake. They'd left her alive. She smiled faintly to herself as sunlight broke over the skyline. The higher they climb, the harder they'll fall. And this time, Clara Zhang would be the one holding the ladder. The following week, Clara Zhang moved through Haverly Group's hallways like a shadow, calm, polite, and invisible to those who had once pitied her. It was exactly how she wanted it. Every day, she worked quietly, letting Michael and Grace believe she'd accepted her lesson. She nodded through meetings, offered neutral comments, and took on small, unthreatening tasks. But beneath the surface, her mind was a storm of precision and planning. Each night, after the office emptied, she slipped into her private workspace, laptop open, encrypted drives running. Adrian Wu's files had given her a keyhole into Haverly's true operations. What she found was staggering. Falsified invoices. Personal accounts hidden under shell subsidiaries. Bonus transfers to names that didn't exist. And every document led back, inevitably, to Michael Liu. Grace Lin, meanwhile, had been helping him cover his tracks. A few mistaken data entries here. A conveniently missing attachment there. Small acts of treachery dressed as loyalty. But Clara took notes on everything. Every lie, every transaction, every whisper. Her first late-night meeting with Adrian came 3 days later at a quiet corner of an upscale bar. He was already there, sleeves rolled up, nursing an espresso rather than a drink. You've been busy, he said as she sat down. I don't like wasting time, Clara replied, pulling a small drive from her purse. This is everything I've gathered so far. But I want to know, why are you really helping me? You could have gone to compliance or the board yourself. Adrian studied her for a moment, his gaze steady. Because internal complaints disappear. You've seen it. Haverly protects its own until the last possible moment. You want justice. I want leverage. Michael's been bleeding the company for years, but no one dares touch him. Clara's lips curved faintly. Until now. He smiled, a flash of admiration behind his calm. Until now. For the first time, she felt the strange pull between them. A current of understanding, power, and something unspoken. Two people who saw the same battlefield, and perhaps the same ghosts. By the next week, her quiet counterattack began. Clara subtly redirected internal communications, ensuring that Michael's fabricated numbers reached the finance team before he could alter them. Grace noticed the shift almost immediately. "Clara," Grace said sweetly one afternoon, leaning against her desk, "you've been so quiet lately. Everything okay?" Clara looked up with a polite smile. "Perfectly fine. Just focusing on work. You know how it is." Grace's eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't believe it, and that was good. Let her wonder. Let her lose sleep. That night, as Clara reviewed another set of falsified audits, Adrian's message appeared on her screen. "Adrian, they're getting nervous." "Good. Keep applying pressure. But don't show your hand yet." "Clara." "I won't. They'll expose themselves soon enough." She hesitated before typing another line. "Clara, why do I feel like you enjoy this a little too much?" His reply came almost instantly. "Adrian, because watching corrupt people destroy themselves is an art form. And you, Clara, are painting a masterpiece." Her heart gave a small, involuntary flutter. She ignored it. This wasn't about emotion. Not yet. As midnight approached, Clara shut down her laptop, the glow of the city reflecting in her window. Michael thought she'd been broken. Grace believed she'd retreated. But in truth, she was only just beginning. Let them play their games. I'm rewriting the rules. And in the background of her carefully orchestrated comeback, Adrian Wu watched quietly, waiting for the moment when revenge and justice would finally collide. 2 weeks passed. The atmosphere at Haverly Group was changing. Slowly, invisibly, but unmistakably. On the surface, everything appeared normal. Michael Liu still charmed the board, Grace Lin still smiled her polished smile, and Clara Zhang still carried herself with quiet efficiency. But beneath that calm surface, Clara had begun to pull strings with surgical precision. Her first step was deceptively simple. She volunteered to assist with a secondary audit review, a task so dull and detail-heavy that no one else wanted it. Grace even thanked her for taking it on, oblivious to the fact that Clara was now sitting directly inside the company's data flow. From there, she quietly began rerouting certain reports, allowing her to monitor the discrepancies in real time. Whenever Michael tried to manipulate a transaction or shift a document, she logged it. Each entry was time-stamped, duplicated, and backed up off-site, through Adrian's encrypted network. By the third week, her collection was complete enough to sync them both. But Clara wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. She wanted them to sweat first. That evening, she met Adrian Wu in his minimalist apartment overlooking the river. The lights of the skyline reflected off the glass, bathing the room in a low amber glow. He was reviewing a series of spreadsheets on his laptop when she entered, and without looking up, he said, "You've done it. Every inconsistency is traceable. Once we submit this to the board, they won't survive the audit." Clara poured herself tea, her expression thoughtful. "Not yet." Adrian looked up, intrigued. "You're holding back?" She met his gaze steadily. "They took months to destroy my credibility. I'm not giving them the mercy of a quick fall. They'll unravel themselves, one careless mistake at a time." A slow smile tugged at his lips. "You're colder than I thought." "Only to those who taught me to be," she replied, voice quiet but resolute. For a moment, the room fell silent except for the hum of the city below. Adrian studied her, the calm in her eyes, the precision in her tone, and something softened in him. "You know," he said finally, "most people crumble when betrayed. You rebuild." Clara met his gaze. "I learn from the best manipulators." There it was again, that current between them, sharp as glass and quietly magnetic. Two people forged in the same fire, drawn by recognition as much as attraction. At the office, Grace's confidence was beginning to crack. She'd noticed small inconsistencies, numbers not matching up, Michael avoiding her calls, reports that didn't align with what she'd seen before. One afternoon, she cornered Clara by the elevator. "Hey," Grace said, forcing a laugh. "You haven't seen the audit drafts lately, have you? I think someone's messing with the files." Clara smiled. Warm, effortless, a picture of innocence. "Really? That sounds serious. Maybe you should talk to Michael. He's in charge of that department, right?" Grace hesitated, suspicion flickering across her face. But Clara's expression gave nothing away. When the elevator doors closed, Grace's reflection wavered in the polished steel, uncertain, anxious. Perfect. That night, Clara sat at her desk as Adrian's message appeared on her screen. Adrian. She's unraveling. Michael's next. You've got them cornered. Clara. Not yet. I need them desperate. Desperation makes people sloppy. A pause. Then another message. Adrian. And when it's over? What will you do then? She hesitated before typing back. Clara. Rebuild. On my own terms. Adrian. And if someone wanted to be part of that? Clara stared at the screen for a long moment, then smiled faintly. Clara. Then they'd have to survive my standards. Outside, the city gleamed, ruthless, ambitious, and alive. Inside, Clara Zheng's web was tightening. Soon, every lie that had been spun against her would collapse under its own weight. And when the dust settled, she wouldn't just reclaim her place. She'd own the entire board. The storm broke on a Wednesday. By then, Clara Zheng had perfected the art of silence. Her days were a choreography of calm efficiency. Meetings, reports, polite nods, and subtle smiles. But beneath the surface, her strategy was in motion, humming like a clockwork machine. Michael Liu had no idea that every document he touched, every financial report he adjusted, was already being mirrored and archived under Clara's encrypted system. The noose was tightening, but he was too confident to notice. And Grace Lin? She was beginning to crack. That morning, Clara was in the elevator when she overheard two junior analysts whispering. I heard there's going to be an emergency audit next week, one said. Yeah. Compliance ordered it directly from the board. Something about inconsistencies in Michael Liu's department. No way. He's untouchable. Was, the other replied, lowering their voice. Someone must have finally found something. Clara's reflection in the polished elevator door didn't change, but inside, her pulse quickened. Perfect timing. Her plan was working faster than expected. By noon, the tension had spread through the entire floor. Grace approached Clara's desk, her usual gloss of charm barely holding. Clara, have you heard about the audit? She asked, voice a shade too high. Clara looked up slowly, her expression politely neutral. Yes. Compliance is being thorough this quarter. Routine, I'm sure. Grace laughed, but it came out brittle. Routine. Right. Of course. She hovered for a moment longer before walking away, but Clara could feel her anxiety like heat in the air. Grace was afraid, and fear made people careless. That night, Adrian Wu called instead of texting. You've stirred the hornet's nest, he said, his voice low and calm through the receiver. Michael's been pulling strings all day. He's calling in favors, trying to delay the audit. He knows something's off. Clara leaned against her window, watching rain trace lines down the glass. Then it's time to give him a little push. What kind of push? The kind he won't see coming. She turned from the window, eyes glinting. Tomorrow, an anonymous report will land in the board's inbox, complete with sample documents and timestamps. Just enough to confirm suspicion. No names yet. Let him sweat. Adrian chuckled softly. You really are terrifying when you plan. Clara smiled faintly. You wouldn't respect me otherwise. A pause. Then, softer. You're not doing this just for revenge, are you? Clara hesitated, then answered honestly. No. I'm doing it because I refuse to be small again. There was a silence on the line. Heavy, electric. Finally, Adrian spoke, his tone lower, gentler. Then let me make sure you never have to be. The next morning, chaos rippled quietly through Haverly Group. The anonymous report had reached the board. Rumors exploded before lunch. Executives whispered in corners. Grace couldn't meet anyone's eyes, and Michael spent half the day in closed-door meetings. By the time Clara stepped into the elevator at 6 p.m., she caught sight of Grace pacing near the executive wing, pale, tense, trembling slightly as she checked her phone again and again. Clara said nothing as their eyes met. She simply smiled, a small knowing curve of her lips, and the elevator doors closed. Grace's hand tightened around her phone. She knew. And that terrified her most of all. That night, Clara met Adrian at their now familiar rooftop terrace. The city was a sea of lights and motion below them. You've started something you can't reverse, Adrian said, leaning on the railing beside her. I don't want to reverse it, she replied softly. I just want it to end the way it should have, on my terms. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, then said, "When this is over, you won't just win. You'll have rewritten the rules." Clara turned to him, the city's glow reflected in her eyes. That's the only victory worth having. The cracks had formed. The empire was trembling. And soon the mighty would fall. The morning sun barely pierced the thick glass of Haverly Group's executive floor, casting long shadows over the tense faces of the board. Michael Liu paced in his office, phone pressed to his ear, a forced calm in his voice. "Ensure the numbers are clean," he barked. "Every audit trail, every transaction. Double-check everything. I don't care how long it takes." Behind him, Grace Lin's hands trembled as she skimmed reports, the cracks in her composure widening with each passing hour. Clara Zhang, meanwhile, arrived as usual, calm and polished. Her presence alone caused subtle shifts in the room, whispers behind closed doors, wary glances, and the faint rustle of unease. Michael's empire was beginning to fracture, and he hadn't even realized who was orchestrating it. By midday, the board had called an emergency meeting. The audit reports, accompanied by the anonymous evidence Clara had strategically released, were laid out across the conference table. Executives exchanged incredulous looks as inconsistencies, ghost accounts, and falsified documents were revealed. Michael's face, usually composed and charming, twitched with panic. Grace clutched her notepad as if it were a shield, her carefully curated image slipping under the weight of truth. Clara sat silently, her hands folded neatly on the table. Every gaze that fell on her was a mix of surprise, respect, and a trace of fear. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The facts spoke louder than any words. Later that afternoon, Clara received a discreet message from Adrian. "Adrian, they're starting to crumble. Stay alert. Don't reveal yourself yet. Let them self-destruct." She smiled faintly and typed back. "Clara. Patience. They'll take care of themselves." The rest of the day passed in a haze of whispered accusations and defensive explanations. Michael's carefully cultivated reputation was dissolving, piece by piece, as the board examined the evidence. Grace attempted to intervene on his behalf, but the cracks in her own credibility were undeniable. By evening, Clara stood at her office window, watching the city lights shimmer like a river of gold. She thought back to the months of meticulous planning, the sleepless nights, the betrayals that had taught her the value of strategy, patience, and self-reliance. Her phone buzzed. Adrian's name appeared. She answered immediately. "They've noticed something's off," he said, voice low and serious. "Grace suspects a leak. She's connecting dots. Just don't let her know you're behind it yet." Clara's lips curved in a faint, controlled smile. "Let her panic. Fear makes people sloppy. That's when they make mistakes we can't afford to overlook." A silence fell. Then Adrian added, softer. "You've grown stronger than I expected." She hesitated, then whispered almost to herself. "I had to. There was no other choice." Later, she watched from the shadows as Grace hastily attempted damage control, trying to salvage what little credibility remained. Michael's voice rose in anger, but it was hollow. The foundation of power he'd built was eroding beneath him. Clara didn't move. She let them fall apart, piece by piece, exactly as she had planned. The silent architect doesn't need to strike directly. She builds the environment where others collapse on their own. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Adrian. "Adrian, tomorrow it ends. Are you ready?" Clara typed back, her fingers steady. "Clara, I've been ready for this since the day they betrayed me." The skyline sparkled beneath her, endless, untouchable, and a reflection of her newfound power. The empire had begun to crack. And Clara Zhang was no longer the powerless girl they had underestimated. The city skyline glimmered through the glass walls of the Haverly Group boardroom, but inside, the atmosphere was anything but bright. Michael Liu's usual charm had vanished, replaced by tension that radiated from his every movement. Grace Lin hovered nearby, her face pale and strained, as though she were trying to hold herself together with sheer willpower. Clara Zhang entered the room quietly, heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She was calm, poised, and utterly in control. The board's attention immediately shifted to her. Some looked surprised, others wary. Michael's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. He knew she had played a part in the chaos, though not the full extent yet. "Good morning," Clara said smoothly, her tone steady and polite. "I trust everyone has reviewed the latest audit?" Michael opened his mouth, but Clara held up a hand. "Before you speak, I'd like to share something with the board." From her bag, she produced a small stack of files, meticulously organized, time-stamped, and duplicated. These documents trace every irregularity in Michael Liu's department, every alteration of financial records, and every cover-up orchestrated by Grace Lin. "Everything you've been led to believe about my errors is provable as deliberate sabotage." A stunned silence filled the room. Michael's jaw tightened. Grace's hand trembled as she reached instinctively for her notes. Clara's gaze swept over the board, unflinching. "You've been presented with the evidence. I'll answer questions, but the facts speak for themselves." Minutes later, the board erupted in murmurs. Executives whispered, exchanged glances, and the atmosphere turned electric with tension. Michael stammered, trying to explain, but every word fell flat against Clara's meticulously documented proof. Grace attempted to intervene, but the records clearly implicated her as a collaborator. Clara stood perfectly still, a serene smile playing on her lips. Each piece of evidence, each revelation, was like a calculated chess move. She had orchestrated this moment carefully, and now she was watching the collapse of those who had betrayed her. After the meeting, she retreated to the rooftop terrace. The city lights stretched endlessly below, sparkling like a river of gold. Adrian Wu was already there, leaning casually against the railing, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You did it," he said, voice low but full of admiration. Clara poured herself a glass of wine and raised it slightly. "We did it." He raised an eyebrow. "We. Don't get sentimental now." She laughed softly, a sound that carried both relief and triumph. "Fine. You helped. Strategically, of course." Adrian's gaze lingered on her, sharp and calculating. "And personally?" Clara met his eyes, the unspoken tension between them palpable. "Personally," she began, then smiled faintly. "I trust you. But not too much. That's the difference between us and Michael." He chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." The next morning, news of Michael and Grace's downfall spread through the company like wildfire. Executives were reassigned, board meetings were rescheduled, and whispers of accountability filled the halls. But Clara Zheng? She walked in as usual, composed, respected, and untouchable. Ryan Cole, a colleague who had doubted her before, approached cautiously. "Clara, I never realized. You orchestrated all of this." She smiled politely. Sometimes the quietest person is the most dangerous when underestimated. And behind that smile, there was no trace of regret, only the thrill of reclaimed power and justice served. Later that evening, on the rooftop, Adrian finally allowed a softer expression to touch his face. "You're remarkable, Clara. Not just smart. Ruthless when you need to be. I didn't think anyone could surprise me anymore." Clara set down her glass, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "I've learned from the best manipulators. And I've become better than I ever imagined." He stepped closer, the distance between them charged with unspoken possibilities. "So, what now?" She looked out over the glittering skyline and smiled, confident and unafraid. "Now we rebuild. On our terms." Adrian reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, a gesture both intimate and charged with trust. "Then let's make it unforgettable." And beneath the stars, the city spread endlessly below, a reminder that ambition, strategy, and resilience could shape destinies, and that Clara Zhang was no longer anyone's pawn. The office was quiet that Monday morning, but Clara Zhang felt a surge of satisfaction as she walked through the polished halls of Haverly Group. Her position was no longer precarious. She had rebuilt her reputation, gained the board's respect, and exposed the betrayal that had threatened her career. For the first time in months, the company felt like hers to navigate. Her first stop was her office, where a sleek new plaque on her desk read, "Director of Strategic Development, Clara Zhang." She allowed herself a small private smile. Every late night, every hidden audit, every patient step of her meticulous plan had led to this moment. By midday, Adrian Wu appeared outside her office, leaning casually against the doorframe, his usual enigmatic smile in place. "You're up early," he said, stepping inside. Clara didn't look up immediately. Early is the only time you can think without interference. She gestured to the skyline beyond her window. The city doesn't slow down, so why should I? Adrian chuckled, moving to the window beside her. You've changed, Clara. Not just professionally. Personally. You're unbreakable now. She turned to him, her eyes steady. I learned the hard way that trust has to be earned and strategy is survival. That doesn't make me ruthless. It makes me prepared. He studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. Prepared. Dangerous. And very, very captivating. Clara's lips twitched in amusement, but she ignored the flicker in her chest. There was still work to do. Over the next few weeks, Clara consolidated her influence. She cultivated allies, reassigned projects to those who proved capable, and quietly ensured that Michael and Grace could no longer manipulate any part of the company. Employees who had once whispered about her incompetence now sought her advice. Junior executives treated her with respect, recognizing her as a leader whose intelligence and calm command couldn't be ignored. But alongside her professional victories, her partnership with Adrian deepened. They worked late into the night, reviewing financial strategies, planning initiatives, and sometimes just watching the city lights together, silent and comfortable in each other's presence. One evening, Adrian broke the silence. You know, Clara, most people would have burned out after what Michael and Grace did. You didn't just survive, you thrived. Clara leaned back, the city reflected in her eyes. They thought betrayal would stop me. It only taught me how to move faster, think sharper, and anticipate every step. That's power. Adrian nodded. And yet, you still have room to feel connection, loyalty, even attraction. His eyes lingered on hers, hinting at the unspoken tension that had grown between them. Clara's lips curved faintly. Even the strongest have hearts. But they have to be earned, carefully. Weeks later, Haverly Group hosted its annual gala. Clara entered the grand hall in a sleek, understated dress that spoke of confidence rather than showiness. Board members, executives, and employees alike turned to acknowledge her presence, some with admiration, others with quiet respect. Adrian appeared beside her, dressed in a shop tuxedo, a reassuring presence that had become both professional and personal. Ready? He asked. She glanced around the room, then nodded. I've been ready for a long time. Now it's time to lead and live on my terms. Together, they moved through the crowd, a united front of intelligence, strategy, and silent power. The city outside twinkled like a river of endless possibilities, reflecting the limitless horizon Clara now commanded. She had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and deception, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. The future wasn't just hers to seize. It was hers to define. And for the first time, Clara Zhang allowed herself to feel a quiet satisfaction. The world had underestimated her once, but it would never do so again. The morning light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Haverly Group's executive suite, bathing Clara Zhang's office in a soft gold glow. From here, she could see the city sprawled endlessly below, a constant reminder of both ambition and opportunity. Clara's reflection in the glass was steady, composed, and powerful. She had risen from betrayal and manipulation, rebuilt her reputation, and claimed a place that few had ever thought she could reach. Michael Liu and Grace Lin had been sidelined, their influence reduced to whispers and regret. And yet, Clara knew this was not the end. It was the beginning of her true legacy. Adrian Wu stepped into her office, carrying 2 coffees and that familiar enigmatic smile. You're up early, Clara remarked, though a faint curve of warmth appeared on her lips. I like to see the city awake before anyone else, Adrian replied, handing her a coffee. And I like to see the woman who's changed the rules of the game before she starts her day. Clara took the cup, letting the warmth seep into her hands. It's been a journey. But I've learned that power isn't just about control. It's about precision, patience, and trust. Choosing the right allies is as important as making the right moves. Adrian's gaze lingered on her, admiration and something deeper in his eyes. Then I'm honored to be part of both. A faint blush touched Clara's cheeks, though her expression remained composed. You've proven yourself indispensable, she said. And I don't give that lightly. Over the next few months, Clara cemented her position. She implemented strategic initiatives, guided company expansions, and fostered a culture of transparency and efficiency. Employees flourished under her leadership, and the board began to recognize her as a visionary force within Haverly Group. She also nurtured her partnership with Adrian, blending trust and professional collaboration with the subtle undercurrent of attraction that had been building since their first rooftop meeting. Their alliance was both strategic and personal, a balance of power and understanding that neither had expected but both appreciated. One evening, as the city lights shimmered below, Clara and Adrian stood on the rooftop terrace. The world felt quiet, almost reverent, as if the city itself acknowledged the journey she had undertaken. "You've truly redefined everything," Adrian said softly. "Your power, your presence. You've created your own rules." Clara smiled, a mixture of satisfaction and serenity. "I've learned from betrayal, yes. But I've also learned that trust and loyalty, when earned, can be even more powerful than revenge. I've surrounded myself with people who inspire me, challenge me, and respect me. That's the legacy I want to leave." Adrian's hand brushed against hers, tentative but deliberate. "And you've left space for more than just strategy, haven't you?" Clara's eyes softened. "Even the strongest leaders need connection. And I've found that with you." He smiled, and for a moment, there was no ambition, no boardrooms, no betrayals. Only the quiet promise of partnership and trust. Clara Zhang had faced deception, heartbreak, and power struggles, but she emerged not only victorious but wise, strategic, and unstoppable. Her legacy wasn't just the empire she controlled, but the way she transformed herself, and the world around her, with grace, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. The city stretched endlessly below them, a living testament to ambition and opportunity. And Clara Zhang, standing at its center, knew that this was just the beginning. A life defined by empowerment, trust, and the knowledge that she would never be underestimated again. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more original novel stories. And stay tuned, our next story is coming soon.